I beat Spider-Man Miles Morales without taking a single hit of damage. Whether I take 1 or 100 damage, I have to restart from the last checkpoint on ultimate mode. So after taking a little disrespect from this man right here, I was in my first fight. Look, the first part was not that bad. No one really had guns and it was a pretty easy basic tutorial. But the second part, well, along with enemies having guns, the game decided to give me a tutorial on how to take damage. I gave myself a pass on this one, but it didn't relieve the fight of all its difficulty. I was still struggling on this. These enemies have unlimited health bars. That prison armor also went crazy. I just had to web everyone to the wall, but Peter was not holding its weight with Rhino, so I had to ride him through them all. But I did get back to my job fighting these prisoners. I guess they found some missile launchers and started shooting me. And about here, I realized that one of the hardest parts of this challenge would be attacking or webbing the wrong enemy. My goal is to focus on 1 or 2 enemies while containing the rest. If I could knock down one, I would web it to the ground for an easy kill. But sometimes, Miles aimed at the wrong enemy, and it wasn't something I would notice before I didn't have enough webs and the enemy got up. This would ruin a few runs, but overall, nothing here is that bad. I wasn't done yet though. This man Rhino did Peter dirty, so I had to go crazy. First phase wasn't bad. As long as I knew the right time to attack, I'll be fine. Second phase was weird. I didn't take damage here, but I did do this. I don't even think he touched me, but damn, this didn't leave me confident for the rest of the game. But aside from this, the fight was pretty easy and I was able to move on. Peter had to leave, but he got me a suit. I can't lie though, it was not very nice. Some hologram training came with it, and I started going crazy until these thugs came in, really thinking that they could mess with Miles Morales. I think you know what came next. From here, I went under Roxon power and started hacking until this purple man barged in and pushed me off. And on my first try, I started going crazy. Nothing was stopping me. I was learning to use Venom as a way to get invincibility frames and relocate. But then, I was about to land an incredible attack until this happened. Literally the same guy that pushed me out in the first place. But I kept going and prevailed, making my way up here. But Miles was on his grind set and had to beat everyone up here too. And I can't lie, such a tight space gave me no room to single enemies out. But there weren't that many of them, so I was able to brute force it with Venom. I got back home and it was time for Christmas dinner. And after picking out some fire music, Finn showed up. I was bored and decided to leave and fix the electricity until it was time to start eating. Finn wanted to hang out, so we made plans for the next day. But more importantly, Uncle Aaron needed help fixing the subways. But he set me up. There were more people here. I guess I was trying to fix the power and line up the trains. I did this easily and went to defuse some bombs. But while doing this, I was getting distracted by the enemies and started going off on them. This play was crazy, like I was never doing this in the last vid. I was still able to defuse the bombs and go on to my favorite side mission. So this man right here had his scat stolen, so I went to follow the thieves. And after stealth killing a few of them, I was put in this full fight. Now this fight has 2 problems: space and people who take up too much space. This was a tiny area for me to be fighting all these enemies, and as a result, I lost many runs. But this wasn't the bad part. I could deal with that, but not these enemies. With multiple at once, I couldn't even attack them, but they were nearly impossible to knock down. Even if I did, all my webs were most likely lost doing so. I kept trying, and over time I realized that I'd keep moving around the battlefield, even if it was tiny. Here, I was able to get one on the wall and web it, and with one left, it was easy. I decided to meet up with Finn, and we opened a time capsule with one of our old science projects in there. Finn left really quick, and I got to go back to the Christmas festival. Miles' mom was giving the speech until the underground made an announcement, and I was put in the hardest fight so far. This place had a lot of enemies, with range. If I tried to fight one, I would have multiple others trying to kill me with bombs, bullets, and these annoying little things that rush up on you. My first goal was to clear the roads. This wasn't too bad, and I was able to get to the rooftops. Nearly every enemy here had a gun. Other enemies from other roofs would follow me here. I died here, a lot. It was a slaughter. I really had no time to attack enemies. I would go somewhere else temporarily to maybe get 1 or 2 to follow me, but most of all to cool down the situation and come back with a clean start. The fight ended up being pretty long, but I was able to get it done, damageless. Now right after this, I was taken to the bridge with an even harder fight. Not because of the enemies, but the environment. It was tiny and there was fire on the ground. I couldn't even walk where I wanted, so if Miles dodges the wrong way, I would have to restart. Some of these attacks were unfair. I couldn't react to them, and in some situations, even if I did, I doubt that would help. Like this guy's slow motion kick, it makes no sense, but my runs did start to get better as I figured out the best order to kill enemies. Even with this, it felt like every try that had potential, I ended up ruining it with a tiny mistake, but eventually I had this run. My movement was spot on, and my Venom use was the best I had so far. I was going crazy, and eventually I was able to win. The bridge started to crash, and I was able to save everyone. I had a moment of peace, where I found out Finn was the leader of the underground, and right after this, I found a lot of them patrolling here, and this is where my best strategy was born. Stealth. While not perfected yet, I knocked out nearly every enemy this way, and the fight wasn't that bad. It took a while, with some tense moments, knowing that with one mistake, I'd have to redo all of it, but I did end up winning. From here, I moved on to the headquarters. I started out with another stealth fight, and I made my way through the vents and fought some enemies, until I met the prowler, Uncle Aaron. The electro mines he gave me were quite useful. Now my main goal here was to retrieve Finn's phone, but in order to do that, I would need to take out all of these enemies and make my way to the bottom. Once again, it wasn't too difficult, but rather required quite a bit of time, as I used stealth. I had a few more more fights to get out of here, but nothing important, and I met up with Finn again for coffee and joined the underground with her. I got a lot of info here and infiltrated this room. This is the most enemies I've ever seen. I really thought about fighting this, but instead decided to use stealth. I knew it would take a while, but not as much risk of dying. Enemies are moving constantly, so I had to use my opportunities quickly. Everything was going well until I found these clusters of enemies that would clearly notice me, and I came up with two strategies here: using camouflage when stealth killing the enemy, and then wait out the other's suspicion. But also, while the enemies were moving, sometimes they would isolate themselves just enough for me to get a safe takedown. After a while, I got rid of all of them and took this secret elevator. After sneaking around where Finn was, I was greeted by a huge fight. I had to worry about lots of different attacks, and they were all manageable, except this one. Most difficult attacks can be easier to dodge in the air, but this lasso did not hesitate, no matter your location. I started using camouflage here, and it let me single out whatever enemy I wanted and get a surprise attack. This let me advance past this fight and into my next mission. I had to get through this door, but first, kill these enemies. There were 4 generators that had to be powered, with enemies around each one. I would use stealth and patience to slowly take them out, as I knew the punishment for greed and rushing would be high. After I got all of this done, I entered and was put in what looks like a theater. I had more electricity work here, and after finishing that up, more of the underground broke in. Luckily, the game let me go with a clean start. While the stealth here was slightly difficult, I was able to slowly tear down the enemies one by one, and by the end of it, Finn found me, and I had to chase her, but she ended up getting me to reveal who I was. While safe for now, I knew this wouldn't last much longer, but in the meantime, I met up with Uncle Aaron to play some sound game. I was finally able to pick up my favorite suit and meet up with Finn, but not long after, Rhino, who now works for Roxon, captured us. We tried to escape by leaving this room and powering the doors. The first block of enemies wasn't bad, I just used stealth while Finn snuck through. I continued into doing an electricity puzzle, and I just want to say, this was the most tragic way to reset in this whole room. I got the electricity right, but Roxon came in with new technology. They can now see me when invisible, but camouflage still isn't completely useless. The technology works in waves that come out after a few seconds, so I'd have a small amount of time to be invisible. This place really forced me to fight head on. I was always at a lack of webs here. I had this guy in a perfect position to stick to the wall, but ended up using all of my webs to save myself from this guy. They also had these types of bombs that made the floor damaging for a while, forcing me to be very careful when dodging, as I died many times from this. I wasn't sure what to do about this fight. It felt as if every time I landed a hit on an enemy, I was supposed to dodge instead. I was able to brute force a lot of enemies on this bridge, which helped a lot. With a few added stealth kills at the beginning, I was able to clear this, and now move on to the hardest fight yet. Rhino was now immune to venom, so my only other option was riding him into tanks. It was odd, but it worked, but still extremely difficult to pull off. There were many enemies in here. I couldn't pay attention to all of them, aside from just dodging, so dealing with this and Rhino didn't seem realistic at the time. I decided to stop for the day. The next day, I got back on and realized that spamming dodge worked pretty well. It was a long phase, but I was able to get through it decently easily. The second phase is where the true challenge revealed itself. You could make nearly all of the 4 here deal damage. I could hardly dodge anywhere, but at the same time, I had to get venom to charge these engines and throw it at him. It was quite hard to deal damage to the enemies, so I resorted to using webs and letting my venom gauge slowly fill up. The first few would be the hardest, but after this, I had enough venom each time from attacking Rhino that I could do it again nearly instantly, but it still remained a death trap. While not only being limited to where I stepped, I also had to worry about the time I spent throwing this. I never really thought about it, but sometimes I would take damage while trying to attack and ruin a great run. I tried over and over, making progress, but never quite there. This phase punished greed. If I tried to get an extra hit in, he would use this attack, and if I tried to throw this too early, I would get hit midway through. The most difficult part was remaining calm and not rushing the end, but once I had this, I was able to win. I had to stop Finn from killing him, but ended up coming home injured, and my identity was revealed to the mom. She was fine with it, and I was able to progress further with a minimal delay, until the prowler trapped me in his prison. I couldn't accept him wanting to stop me from protecting everyone. Honestly, the first phase was pretty easy, just some plain fighting, and Venom let me clear it without a challenge. But the second phase with the clones changed everything. The clones are pretty annoying to get rid of, and the prowler is just as hard as usual. In order to deal good damage in that downtime without the clones, I would need to use all of my resources. This was all the damage I could get in, even with these holograms, electro webs, and venom. This was the main attack that ruined my whole run while I was trying to fight the clones. The timing on it was pretty strict, and sometimes I just didn't notice. Over time, I got better at dealing damage without my gadgets and venom, but this attack was still ruining my runs. While I was losing hope, I started to use my skill points. I'm not sure if it helped, but there was no reason not to. And here, I started getting better. The clones weren't as hard anymore, and I could attack him with less risk. Not long after this, I won, and was on my way back to this building when I found out how many enemies there were here. I can't lie, I just brute forced it with stealth, and after solving this puzzle, I was put in a flashback. Miles and Finn had a science project in this exhibit, and we wanted to see it, but they forgot to buy tickets. We were able to sneak in and see it after stealing a few things, but pretty quickly I was put in the real world and in a fight. For the first battle, the only difficult part was this guy with a hammer, but aside from that, I got out quite easily. But the second fight in this open area was the opposite. There were countless armed enemies on this top floor, so I could barely focus on the bottom ones. But if I went to fight the gunmen, it would become overcrowded. The beginning was mostly a test of how long I could survive. Once I got up here, the real challenge arose. It was a lot of enemies, and I didn't know how to control control everyone coming at me. I started to lure them back down for a bigger battlefield and was beginning to work, and after a few tragic deaths, I emerged victorious. Heading into the finale, I was approached by what is by far the most difficult fight in the game. The first step was taking out a few enemies around here, and then I headed onto this roof. These tanks could shoot at me, but I could also tear them apart. I would do this, camouflage, and then head to the other side and repeat until all of them were gone. After about 2 hours of trying, the battlefield was left with this, but I died soon after. After only a few more runs, I was left with 3 enemies. I was able to get a stealth kill on the biggest one, camouflage, then run. With only 2 left, I was able to wait until they fought, which let me get another kill on one, and after that, it was easy. And finally here, I was at the end of the game, the Finn boss fight. Now, when I started out, I was going on a crazy combo, until she used the shield attack. This was here to stay. Every time I would attack, if I went on just a little too long, I would automatically take damage. Finn could use this at any point, and I couldn't dodge it, so I really had to be patient here. There was really no way to predict this either, so I had to keep my attacking to short chunks, making the phase take forever. I kept trying and realized that I would usually be able to land a venom attack and a finisher with a few basic attacks in between. One of the other difficult attacks was a sword one. It would usually happen 3 times in a row. It was just difficult to dodge. Pretty simple, but in order to start an attack, I had a few strategies. Go invisible and rush up on Finn, use this electro web and stun her, use a venom dash, or just wait for the perfect time. But even with this, there were still random attacks that I didn't see coming. But once I learned to stick to the strategy, I was able to eventually win. Second phase had a lot more ranged attacks. This one was easily dodgeable and left time for a venom dash. This one, where she rushes at you, was great because if I dodged behind her, it'll leave time for a free combo. Overall, this phase wasn't that bad. I just had to learn when I could attack. But pretty quickly, I was in the third phase. Finn would start out by placing a turret and launching missiles at me. If I was quick, I could immediately throw this at Finn before I got hit. This would give me little time to attack before this happened. After this death, I started to realize that this would be the hardest phase so far. I was always so far away from Finn, so I could either venom dash if I had it, or rush up, where I might take damage. I decided it was safer to stay in the air, so I would continuously dodge, waiting for an opening. Later on, I realized that camouflage was a good way to get close to Finn. So with everything I'd learned, this happened. The fourth phase ended up being way harder than the third, along with some razor blades that Finn can throw at you. I was trying for a while, hoping to dodge everything, until an opportunity opened up, or I could use a venom dash. I got some damage in here, but not enough to win without dying eventually. I decided I needed to switch up my strategy for this one. I started playing very aggressive. I would attack in short bursts, so she didn't hit me with something like this, but she also didn't have a chance to throw many of these. I was able to reach this part where all you have to do is dodge, and then take the opportunity to attack. I died once here, but was able to get it on the second try. I disabled the explosion and Finn died, and that's where the game finished. But that's the end of the video. It was hard, but not as bad as when I gave myself one day to get every Sight of Grace in Elden Ring.